Nick Whalen here from RotoWire, back with another video helping you get ready for fantasy basketball draft season. I'm going to tell you about 5 players who are very boring, but very safe picks in fantasy basketball this year. Let's get right to the list. And we start with the quintessential boring veteran in fantasy basketball, Tobias Harris. Any list of boring players feels like it has to start with Tobias Harris. That is the law. He's back in Detroit after essentially getting ran out of town in Philly. And look, as frustrating as Tobias Harris could be at times, all this man does is post top 65 fantasy seasons. He's been a top 65 player in total value in roto leagues for a full decade running. Part of that is he simply does not miss games. Over the last decade, only 2 players have played in more games than Tobias Harris. Those are Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Harrison Barnes, if you're curious. And even in per game value, Harris doesn't see that much of a dip. He's been a top 80 player in per game in 9 of the last 10 seasons. Moving to Detroit, yeah, it's probably a downgrade in terms of the situation, but could be an upgrade in terms of Tobias Harris' opportunity in that offense. The Pistons brought him in for a reason. They're telling themselves they're going to be a better team this season. We will see, but Harris is going to start. He's going to play big minutes. And once again, he will probably finish as like the 64th best fantasy player. Next on our list, one of my favorite players to draft each and every year. I'll be doing it plenty this season. CJ McCollum of the New Orleans Pelicans. He was a bargain last season when his ADP slipped into the 80s and even in the 90s in some formats. He's going in that same range again this season. 2 seasons ago, keep in mind, McCollum, he was closer to a top 50 or a top 60 pick, and honestly, not much has changed. McCollum has been a top 70 fantasy player in each of the last 9 NBA seasons in per game value. He finished 42nd on a per game basis a year ago. Now, the Pels did bring in DeJounte Murray. He will take some usage away, that's for sure. But McCollum now slides back to his more natural 2-guard spot. Could see a slight dip in scoring, but I think the rebounds and the assists are safe. His percentages have always been rock solid. Not really much to worry about there. He is going into his age 33 season, so maybe we start to see some physical decline, but I still think McCollum is the definition of a safe, boring veteran. I'm more than happy to draft him at his ADP. Before we move on to our next player, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball channel. You can do it right there. Just click that little subscribe button. We're going to bring you a ton of content leading up to opening night. You can find all of our podcasts here on the RotoWire YouTube channel as well. Another boring veteran I'm happy to draft this season, Rudy Gobert. I felt a lot better about Gobert at his ADP last season. He was going off the board in the 60s and 70s, just way too late. You're not getting that same crazy discount this time around, but that's because Gobert once again did what he always does last season. He shot 65+% from the field, gave you 12 to 13 rebounds per game. He blocked a couple of shots. And as always, he stayed healthy. I mean, as far as 7'3" big men go, Gobert has been incredibly healthy throughout his career. He hasn't really missed significant time since all the way back in 2017 during his peak Utah days. Now, he doesn't have the same upside as those absolute peak years, but Gobert saw boosts in rebounding and blocks last season, really bounced back from a down 22-23 campaign. I don't think that changes, especially without Karl Anthony Towns now in Minnesota. Gobert's going around pick 50 on average this season. Last year, he finished as the 38th best fantasy player in 8-cap roto. The year before, he was 68th, and that felt like kind of a rock bottom season for Gobert. Didn't even get you 1.5 blocks per game. Even if you're a Gobert pessimist and you think there could be some decline, which is fair, we're still talking about a guy who's extremely safe and ultimately has a really high floor. Another boring big man who I love getting late in drafts, Ivica Zubac of the LA Clippers. Now we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of boring veterans. I absolutely love when I can land Zubac around pick 100, pick 110 in drafts. He's returned top 100 value in 3 of the last 4 seasons. And like Rudy Gobert, he does not miss games. He's played 70+ in 4 of the last 5 seasons. Doesn't, of course, have the same scoring, rebounding baseline as Gobert, and he's not going to give you 2 blocks per game. He'll probably sit in that 1.2, 1.3 range, but that's fine. And he's discounted appropriately, right? He's not a major drain on the free throw percentage category. That's a big plus for Zubac. Shot 72% at the line last year. He's a career 74% free throw shooter. Not great, but strong for a true center. And he only played 26 minutes a year ago, down about 2.5 minutes from 2 seasons ago. I think that number could easily rise closer to 28, 29 minutes per game this season. It feels like the Clippers have always had some other random big man who they need to feed minutes, whether it's Mason Plumlee, Daniel Tice, Isaiah Hartenstein. They don't really have that this year. I mean, Mo Bamba is the only other real center on this roster. So I'm not saying Zubac is going to come out and play 33 minutes a game, but there is room for some progression there. especially since the Clippers should be motivated to be as competitive as possible this season. Depending on your host site, you will see Zubac's ADP has risen a bit compared to the last few seasons, so you may have to do the unthinkable and take him at like 98 instead of 112, but I'm fine with that. Always great when you can lock down a reliable center-eligible player that late in the draft. The fifth and final boring veteran on our list, Tyus Jones of the Phoenix Suns. Arguably the biggest steal of the offseason, dollar for dollar, ending up in Phoenix on a minimum contract. He's been one of the best backup point guards in the NBA for a very long time. He's going to start now in Phoenix, and obviously they have 3 high-usage players in that starting 5, but Jones has never been a high-volume scorer. I don't really see that having a major impact on his stat line. We're looking for the assists, we're looking for the steals, the threes, and the field goal percentage. He shot almost 49% from the field last season in Washington. He's in a much better basketball situation now as far as generating those assists go. He's grown into an elite three-point shooter, 41% last year, 39% on aggregate over the last 3 seasons. And I think he'll be a perfect complementary piece in Phoenix. I think there's a really nice floor here for a guy you could still get in the 115 to 125 range overall. And keep in mind that all 3 of those high usage players, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal, have missed a ton of time over the last few seasons. Beal in particular hasn't played more than 60 games since 2018. So there will be plenty of nights this season when Tyus Jones is asked to take on a little bit more of that offensive responsibility when one or maybe more of the big 3 is sidelined. So Tyus Jones has been one of my favorite late round pickups in drafts so far. You're never excited when you draft Tyus Jones. It's a boring pick, but it's ultimately a very safe pick. That'll do it for our list of boring veterans to draft in fantasy basketball this season. Look, if you made it this far in the video, please hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all of our content here on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. Give this video a like as well if you're enjoying it. And go check out rotowire.com/try. That'll get you free access to everything on our site, all of our content, all of our draft tools, our rankings, you name it, rotowire.com/try.